Hey, 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 it's your girl, your favorite paralegal, aka Cassandra Lynn, and welcome to Legal Doc Talk 24/7. Hey guys, so this is a Russell Simmons case update, but before I can update you guys, I pretty much had to familiarize myself with his case, so as many of you, and so I just decided to pull the complaint and read parts of it so we can get an understanding of what was going on. So, as you all are aware, last February, Jane Doe filed a complaint against Russell Simmons in regards to some pretty not so nice claims. She advised that he actually harassed and assaulted her. I didn't too much follow up, and by this time last year, I had a YouTube, but I didn't have my channel to start, the Legal Doc Talk. And so I want to familiarize myself with the case a little bit. Well, it's nothing really to familiarize because it's ended, but I wanted to see exactly what happened during this case. So take a trip with me as we read the complaint. We also are going to read the order that the judge submitted dismissing the case with prejudice. And if you know what with prejudice means, that means that she can file the same claim and allegations against him again if he ever decides to come back to the United States of America, in which I do not think he will. So this is the complaint. As I stated, it was filed back in February of last year, probably the 16th. So a good year ago, about a year ago, this was filed. Um, Let me see. It states here that, okay, so this is the introduction. Let's just get to the meat and potatoes as to exactly what happened. So, Jane Doe is over the age of 18 and has worked in the music and entertainment industry for over 25 years. In or around the early 1990s, Miss Doe started producing music videos. Many of the videos she produced were for Def Jam. Through a time, though at the time she had her own independent production company. During the mid 1990s, Miss Doe went in house and worked for Def Jam. While at Def Jam, she was responsible for supervising all film production and a demanding release scheduled for a large artist roster. Miss Doe worked in collaboration with numerous directors, executives, and many iconic music artists to devise concepts for groundbreaking campaigns directed at a global youth market. Her videos received multiple awards, including from Billboard and MTV. After Mr. Simmons assaulted her, Miss Jane Doe quit Def Jam in 1997 and worked as an executive producer for film and commercial production companies. She ran divisions to make visual music content, including music videos, live concert films, and music documentaries. Miss Doe brought in new business, citing new talent, collaborated with A-list film directors on projects, supervised sales teams in procuring creative and lucrative accounts, and supervised our production. Despite her success, Ms. Doe found it difficult to be an effective employee or remain in a position for more than a few months, experiencing the effects of trauma from Mr. Simmons' assault. She had radically changed from the confident and aesthetic executive known for excellent coping skills in the face of chaos. She struggled in her relationships with employers. When she encountered conflict with a supervisor, she became overwhelmed with anxiety and had to disengage. This was the opposite of how she was before the assault, an exemplary employee who could handle any conflict, known for positive and productive relationships with crew, artists, and employers. Her value as a problem solver and diplomat in very challenging and demanding work environments diminished significantly. After the assault, she became a completely different person. Nevertheless, from 2000 to 2018, Ms. Doe was employed by numerous studios on projects as a writer and a producer, including Netflix, 20th Century Fox, CBS Films, uh, Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers, and New Line Cinema. Currently, Ms. Doe has a family film set up at Netflix and is adapting a children's book as a feature film. This is so sad. So that's what's happening. I think we already know who he is. Let's see. So the assault, sexual assault is pervasive in the music industry writ large. That's sad. However, when Miss Doe first met Mr. Simmons, he was not flirtatious with her at all. In fact, they ran into each other and spoke many times in her capacity as an independent producer, contracted to make Def Jam videos before she officially started to work at Def Jam in the mid 1990s. They were professional colleagues. Once employed at Def Jam, a professional relationship with Mr. Simmons continued, and Miss Doe would deliver music videos to Mr. Simmons' apartment for review with no incident. I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. In fact, the practice at the time was so common that many people worked in and out of Mr. Simmons' apartment. Mr. Simmons rarely sat at a desk. He would be on a treadmill or on his couch when both women and men would come over to conduct business. Mr. Doe's colleagues at Def Jam and other executive and artists frequently frequented Mr. Simmons' apartment on a regular basis, sometimes working there. It was very casual environment for everybody. Mr. Simmons called people over to his Manhattan apartment all the time when he did not want to come to the office, as he lived nearby the office. That's how I used to do. Well, I never had nobody come to my house, but I would work from home versus going to my office. If any employee or colleague would not get a hold of Mr. Simmons at the office and thus could not move forward on a project without his approval, it was common to head over to Mr. Simmons' apartment in order to show him something or get approval. Before the assault, Mr. Simmons suddenly began to turn his rapacious attention toward Miss Doe. Mr. Simmons would arrive at Def Jam, enter Miss Doe's office, and shut the door behind him. He would sit on her desk, lean over her, aggressively invading her personal space while making sexual innuendos, suggesting and advancing and rubbing the front of his pants. Mr. Simmons would follow Miss Doe to the door or block her path to prevent her from opening it again. This happened repeatedly during that time period. Mr. Simmons' harassment of Miss Doe in the office was so pervasive that when a senior executive became aware Mr. Simmons was in the building and had gone to her office, he immediately went to Miss Doe's office, banged on the door and opened it, and yelled at Mr. Simmons to leave. On one occasion, Miss Doe brought to Mr. Simmons' apartment a rough cut of video she needed him to view for approval. Mr. Simmons aggressively and relentlessly flirted with Miss Doe, made sexual innuendos and advances, asking sexually explicit questions, including personal questions about her sexual preferences, and questioning if she was currently wearing a bra. What? On this day, Miss Doe was wearing professional attire, including a suit jacket and pants. Miss Doe responded by telling Mr. Simmons to cut it out and stop it, trying to deflect his attention and refocus on the work while trying not to sound accusatory or bruise his ego. Mr. Simmons brought Miss Doe to a bedroom to watch the rough cut. It was not uncommon practice for Mr. Simmons to conduct business in his bedroom while sitting on the bed. Mr. Simmons had a childlike and playful demeanor and began jumping on the bed while continuing to make sexual advances and asking Miss Doe to have sex with him. Miss Doe responded by saying no and treated the suggestion as though it was a ridiculous idea while being cautious not to offend Mr. Simmons. This is crazy. All of a sudden, Mr. Simmons performed a wrestling move, climbing on top of Miss Doe and pinning her arms down on the bed. Miss Doe began to sweat profusely. Mr. Simmons then sat on top of Miss Doe and insisted that they have X. Miss Doe rejected his advance and told him to get off and stop several times. She told him she was serious and she meant it. But Miss Stowe was forcefully pinned, could not move under his weight, and Mr. Simmons would not listen to her. She tried repeatedly to get up. Undeterred, Mr. Simmons ignored Miss Doe's resistance and proceeded to grape her. After it was over, Mr. Simmons left the room. As Miss Doe pulled herself together to leave, Mr. Simmons called Miss Doe to the bathroom, where he was now taking a bath with an open door, and attempted to talk about work for a few minutes before dismissing Miss Doe to go back to the office. After the assault, Miss Doe went back to the office, but she was forever changed. For weeks, she told no one about the what happened. She experienced severe disassociation, depression, and anxiety. She no longer went to the Def Jam offices regularly to work and came up with reasons to work from her nearby apartment. A short time later, Miss Doe gave notice, left Def Jam, and left New York altogether to move to California, where her family was living. Because of Mr. Simmons, Miss Doe gave up her high powered dream job running a thriving division she had built and had a large salary. The pride she had for her role in helping transition a marginalized music genre to one of the most popular and lucrative in the world was gone. And I'm going to stop there because we all know what happens when individuals go through this and they have to pick up and leave and start a new life, but they still have to end up coping with what happened to them. Throughout this court process, I was reading the court docket, and I noticed that she even requested for a lot of the documents that were submitted by him to be unsealed, and the court denied that, but they denied it without prejudice. So if they feel later on down the line, and this was done actually in January, so I don't know, maybe they can go ahead and file another. Well, if this case was to continue and she refiled her request, they would once again take a look at it. But I believe that she wanted people to know exactly what it is that he was hiding, why he was hiding it, like why. I I understand the privacy, just like, they are allowed to use the pseudonym Jane Doe or John Doe, but like, why not have your filings, unsealed so that the public can see exactly what you're filing? Like, what are you trying to hide? Now this is the judge's memorandum, as far as they had to review this because he was moving for this case to be dismissed. One, he lives in Bali. He's never coming back. He ended up retiring in Bali. So, really, the court does not have. Now, if he was in the States, then they would have the federal subject matter jurisdiction, but it boils down to the diversity jurisdiction, in which some federal courts do have the ability to hear cases when individuals are citizens of different states and even countries, but it didn't work out here. Um, the courts, and this is the opinion of Judge John Coltel, I believe that's how you say his name. It states that the plaintiff Jane Doe brought this action against Russell Simmons, alleging that he actually harassed and assaulted her. The plaintiff invoked federal subject matter jurisdiction based on the alleged complete diversity of the parties. The defendant now moves for a judgment on the pleadings, arguing that the plaintiff lacks subject matter jurisdiction. The plaintiff alleges that she is domiciled in California and that the defendant is domiciled in New York, while the defendant contends that he is a stateless American citizen domiciled in Indonesia. For the following reason, the motion for judgment on the pleadings is granted. A plaintiff alleges that she was sexually assaulted and harassed and assaulted and raped by the defendant, a music producer and founder of Def Jam Records, while working as a senior level music executive at Def Jams in the mid 1990s. The defendant's actions caused her emotional distress and harm for her career. The plaintiff alleges that this action against the defendant is timely pursuant to the New York's Adult Survivors Act. The plaintiff alleges claims for aggravated battery and assault, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a crime of violence motivated by gender in violation of the New York City Administrative Code. The defendant, after filing an answer to the amended complaint, filed a motion for judgment on the pleading pursuant to the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 12C, asserting that the court lacked subject matter jurisdiction over the action, that a general release of all claims barred the plaintiff's action, and that the plaintiff's claims were time barred. The court permitted the plaintiff to engage in limited discovery relating to the citizenship of the defendant and the validity and applicability of the general release of claims. After limited discovery, which included a deposition of the defendant, the court denied the defendant's first motion for judgment on the pleadings without prejudice, and the defendant filed a renewed motion for defendant judgment on the pleadings, focusing solely on the subject matter jurisdiction issue and arguing that the plaintiff failed to establish complete diversity of the parties. Because you have to understand, it is the jurisdiction. He is in Indonesia. So she claimed he was in New York, but he's no longer in New York because he has his visa, his retired visa, or I think it is his visa in Indonesia. So therefore, the court has no jurisdiction over Russell Simmons. Let me see where Let me see what else. Let's see. The federal court has subject matter jurisdiction over an action that is between citizens of different state or citizens of a state and citizens of a subject of a foreign state where the amount in controversy exceeds 75,000. For an individual, citizenship depends on the state in which that person is domiciled, meaning the place where a person has his true fixed home and principal establishment, and to which wherever he is absent, he has intention of returning. Bro has his principal home in Bali, and he ain't planning on returning to New York. So that's out the window. A United States citizen domiciled abroad is stateless for the purpose of Section 1332 and is therefore neither a citizen of the state of the United States nor a citizen of the foreign state. So what they're saying is that because he's domiciled abroad, he lives abroad, he's not even a citizen of the United States and he's not a citizen of the foreign state. So he's stateless. Therefore, the federal court does not have jurisdiction over him. Oh, I feel so bad. Factors to consider when determining a party's domicile include current residence, voting registration, driver's license and automobile registration, location of brokerage and bank accounts, membership in a fraternal organization, churches and other associations, places of employment or business, and payment of taxes. In this case, the plaintiff asserts that the defendant is domiciled in New York. Specifically, the plaintiff argues that the defendant was born and raised in New York and has not met his burden to show a change in his initial domicile by clear and convincing evidence. The defendant responds that the plaintiff failed to establish that the defendant was domiciled in New York at the time the complaint was filed, and that in actuality, the defendant was previously a citizen of California and is now domiciled in Indonesia. Even assuming that the plaintiff successfully established that the defendant was at one point domiciled in New York, the defendant has provided clear and convincing evidence that he was domiciled in Indonesia when the complaint was filed. The defendant first traveled to Indonesia in 2018. He lived in multiple residences in Indonesia since 2018, and he intends to remain in Indonesia. In November 2021, after receiving 3 temporary visas, the defendant was granted a permanent Indonesian retirement visa. The defendant sold his New York apartment in 2021. He lives on the property of a hotel in Indonesia. The hotel is owned by a company which the defendant holds the majority interest, and the company has a 25-year lease on the property. These facts show that the defendant has not been domiciled in New York since the at least 2021, if not earlier. And remember, she filed this in 2024. Ah, In conclusion, the court has considered all arguments of the parties to the extent not specifically addressed above. The arguments are either mute or without merit. Accordingly, the case is dismissed without prejudice for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. The clerk is directed to enter a judgment dismissing the complaint without prejudice, meaning that she can refile with using the same claims, the same alleged claims. She can refile. The clerk is also directed to close the case and to close all pending motions. And that's it. So the case is dismissed without prejudice for a lack of subject matter jurisdiction. So if and when he ever decides to come back to the United States, more than likely she would probably file, but I don't think that is likely that he will. And the court has determined, based off of the evidence that Russell Simmons has provided, that he is a citizen. Well, he has his retirement visa in Indonesia, where he's living at a property at the hotel where he has interest at. I don't think Russell is coming back. It is very sad that this lady won't get her justice. Um, I'm just very interested how this is going to play out in the years to come, because people are going to be keeping their eye on this particular case, even though it's closed. It's going to be in the back of our minds that if he ever steps foot in the United States, on United States soil, will she be able to file this lawsuit again? That is the biggest question. Y'all tell me what y'all think about this in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, you all be blessed and I'm out. Bye.